What are ideas worth? What are ideals worth? Imagine you were a YouTuber with so many ideas, but then once you get into it, after a while you notice yourself fighting against the algorithm more than for your ideas. Or you're someone who wants to be themselves, whatever that means, but everyone seems to defy you. And after a while, you begin to fight against them and their expectations more than for your values. Or imagine you're a 16th century theologian who is fighting for the peasants, for the God of the poor at first, but then begins to fight against the God of the rich. Ideas and ideals are fragile. They're not linear. They have so many cracks in them, especially if we begin to fight against something more than for something. This video is inspired by Eric Vuillard, The Poor of the Poor, which is about a German theologian, Thomas Muntzer, who fought both against Martin Luther and the Roman Catholic Church in the 16th century. And we might say Thomas Muntzer equated liberation of peasants with liberation of all Christianity, which sounds like a noble goal at first, but eventually his methods begin to be described as aggressive theologies. And even though it seems that he's fighting for God, in reality, quarrels about the beyond have to do with the world here below. And in the book, when the narrator talks about these aggressive theologies, their impetuousness is a violent expression of poverty. So it is not just people fighting for God and for their lives, for equality, for justice, but essentially against the rich. And as important as it is to fight against certain things, big and small, if we fight against more than we're fighting for, it is easy for that to become radicalized in some way and filled with anger, resentment, rage, to a point where we forget about the core of our ideas or ideals. You might even say that it is impossible to have pure ideas or ideals untarnished by some of the inequalities or limitations we face. But I think that's why it's even more important to face whether or not we're fighting for or against, whether we're filled with hope or hatred. But of course, it is not entirely up to us, because sometimes we begin to say our truth, fight for something, but we're not heard. And when we're not heard, it is very easy to get angry at the world. And we begin to focus less on what we want to say and more on just screaming, however sensationalist or aggressive that may be. Eventually, even Müntzer is described as too much. Müntzer's vehemence frightened off other theologians. Or eventually he turns aggressive and denies that anything could be changed amicably. And when he is eventually condemned and beheaded, it happens because, according to the narrator, he was so bad at hating because he had sought the reasons for his existence so far from himself and transmuted his hatred into bitter faith. And because one does not get bread or freedom except by grabbing it, he found himself there. So that definitely tells us at least two things. One is that when hatred seeps into whatever you're doing, it can very much ruin it. But also, sometimes we have no choice in the matter. Sometimes if we want something, we just have to grab it, no matter how relentless or violent we may be. One may say so. So we may seem to be stuck where our conditions disable us from doing anything amicably or hopefully. But at the same time, when we choose the other path, we're really just setting ourselves up for failure and further separation and conflict. I mean, I probably don't even have to get started on what populism is today. And as I read an article about the psychology of populism, it said that there is now reasonably consistent evidence that populism thrives on people's feelings of a lack of political power, a belief that the world is unfair and that they do not get what they deserve. Now the world is changing too quickly for them to retain control. Whenever people attribute the origins of their perceived vulnerability to factors outside themselves, populism is not far away. And of course, it's important to remember that many of the injustices we face, big or small, individual or collective, are not up to us, are not our fault, and that we shouldn't just accept them and endure them. But I think we should also not go as far to become hateful and blame the entire world. Because then we get caught up in that opposition against something instead of keeping in mind what it is we're fighting for, what our values are, what we're hopeful about, what we want to achieve, who we want to be, how we want the world to be. And one other thing that stood out to me in the book might seem unrelated at first, but I think it holds something important within. To love the poor means to love baneful poverty, to stop despising it. It means to love mankind. For man is poor irremediably. We are poverty, buffeted between desire and disgust. And I think we'll never reach a point of both systemic equality and one on individual everyday mindset level if we don't realize that we all have the potential for power, beauty, riches, but also for dirt, poverty, ugliness, every one of us. And it is only when we humanize all parts of ourselves, all of our potential, is when we begin to see each other and ourselves as equals. And whether or not we agree with someone, or we think what they're doing is wrong, we still need to see each other at the same level in order to ever solve anything or understand anything. So much of conflict exists because of some kind of dehumanization, especially when the thing in question seems unappealing or disturbing, or if it's a belief that we do not agree with or think is damaging. And of course, if we think that a belief is cruel and damaging and dehumanizing in itself, we should not embrace it, but we should at least look it in the eye and consider that someone believes in it. And if we put ourselves in someone else's shoes and see how someone might believe in something, we might just understand it better and know how to work with it so that we can eventually change things. So as unfinished and huge the topic is, there are two things that are subtly connected that I wanted to leave with you today. One is that we should fight for something, first and foremost, and not against. And two, we should humanize everything, especially the things we avoid, be it someone else's flaws or beliefs different from ours or our own weaknesses. Because only then we begin to stop seeing things as binaries, us versus them, good versus bad, and we finally manage to see the nuance. And even if we have to fight against certain things, we also, to an extent, need to fight with them, because only then we will achieve anything in the long term. And humanization almost always allows empathy. And there is huge power in empathy, because if we try to look at something in its very depth, and we see it without judgment or hatred, as I said, that's when we begin to understand it. Because how else can we understand something that we wholeheartedly and fully reject? Empathy is not just something we use to feel good about ourselves. It's also a tool to fight for and against and with and within. This was the last part in my International Booker Prize series. I know I should have talked about Olga Rav's The Employees, but I could not find the book anywhere, so I'm sorry I did not make a video on it. If you read it, you can always let me know in the comments what you thought. And aside from that, do let me know if you like the series. I really enjoyed making it, and I must admit, I will make more book-related content in the future because that's what excites me. I do study literature, and for a while I managed to separate the two, the degree from my videos, but recently I just found it impossible because it's just what excites me the most. And I think that the more excited and passionate I am about what I'm doing, the more value I can bring to you, and that's what I ultimately want to do. So I hope you're enjoying the videos and that you'll keep enjoying the videos, but do let me know what it is that you want to see. If there's anything that I might be able to give you and you think there should be more of that, then let me know, and I try to somehow juggle my own ideas with your expectations and create something substantial, because I've been rethinking many things, and that's where I'm at right now. But thank you for watching as always, and if you want to see more videos from the series, I'm going to put the link to the playlist somewhere here. So hopefully I'll see you next week.